If kids go through puberty on social media, on a smartphone and social media, things don't come out right. They don't develop normal toughness. They're anxious. Their whole life is a gigantic performance review. All the time they're being rated.
We actually have to die trying, frankly, is what I've said to my political colleagues. We need to do something, and doing something, even if it's imperfect, we have to do it for the sake of our kids.
Jonathan, do you see any evidence that these platforms are willing to change their ways?
In the documents we have from Snapchat, in 2022, they were getting 10,000 reports of sextortion from their users, not per year, per month, every month. And because that's just what was reported, as they say, this is just the tip of the iceberg. We give our kids a smartphone and social media right around age 10 or 11 across the developed world. And we say, you know what? To hell with you. I'm busy. Why don't we let weirdos on Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat raise you? Let's let them program your brain. And we'll see how that comes out. It's not you, parents. It's the goddamn companies that are stealing your kids' attention. It's their responsibility.
Either way, I think it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And I think there'll be broad political support. And as I said, if we don't politicise it and we just keep it about New Zealand and about our kids, as Jonathan said in his original book, we have lots of security in the physical world, but we don't have any parameters in the virtual world.
Kia ora and welcome to One Young Mind podcast. It's a fact that our young people live in an increasingly addictive digital world, and whilst that world can bring a lot of positives, what exactly are the risks? I'm Matilda Green, content creator, presenter and mother of three.
And I'm Dr. Manish Deva, paediatrician. This podcast discusses mental health issues, self-harm and suicide. So please listen with care. If you or someone you love is struggling, please reach out to a professional for help. Helpline numbers can be found in the show notes of this podcast.
Kia ora koutou and welcome to One Young Mind. Our first guest needs no introduction. He's the author of The Anxious Generation, a touchstone for parents and educators around the world navigating the digital age.
Jonathan Haidt is an American social psychologist and professor at NYU Stern School of Business, whose work explores morality, ideology, and how technology affects developing minds.
He joins us today from New York. Jonathan, a very warm welcome to One Young Mind.
Thanks so much for having me on. I visited New Zealand in 2019, and like every American who has ever been to New Zealand, I love New Zealand. What an amazing, beautiful, interesting country. And let me also just say, you're the last best hope for the English-speaking world, because what I learned when I was there is that you're the last English-speaking country that lets kids climb trees. Everywhere else, we freaked out, too dangerous, don't let them do it.
Yeah.
No, nobody's coming for our tree climbing, that's for sure.
And with us in the studio, father of two and recently vocal supporter of stronger online safety, Prime Minister of New Zealand, Christopher Luxon. Kia ora, Prime Minister.
Well, kia ora, good morning. It's actually really special for me to be here with Jonathan because I lived in the States and I started to read some of the articles that he wrote, sort of probably in the mid-2010s, 2014, 2016. And then I read his book in 2018, The Coddling of the American Mind. And then he came out to New Zealand actually in 2019. This is all before I came to politics. And I just have always I thought he was right on the money on everything there. And so it's been great now to get to politics and then sort of at least have a crack at trying to get some of this stuff implemented, which has been good. So, Jonathan, great to hang out with you today too. So appreciate it.
So, Jonathan, we might start with you and about that climbing trees, and great to hear the love for New Zealand. But in the last 10, 15 years, we've had a tripling of psychological distress, self-harm presentations to ED, anxiety. And that's not just a New Zealand story. So are you able to just outline, how did we get here?
Yes, certainly. So what happened around 2014, 2015 in the United States was we noticed that our college students were very depressed and anxious, and all of our counseling centers were overwhelmed. It wasn't like that in 2012, but by 2015 it was. And that's what led me to write this article that the Prime Minister mentioned, called The Coddling of the American Mind. And at that time, we saw that it was overprotection, and that was a piece of it. So we talked about how we've been overprotecting our kids. We don't let them have normal toughening experiences. Kids are anti-fragile, all of that. Now, a surprising thing we knew back then was that the same stuff was happening in Canada and the UK. That was very clear. The same craziness at the universities, the protests, the safe spaces, all that stuff. And to a lesser extent, there was a little bit in Australia and not much in New Zealand. This is 2015, 2016, 2017. So we knew that there's something going on in the Anglosphere. Okay. A couple years later, we now begin to get data showing that actually social media is a big part of this. It's not just the overprotection. In 2015, we had no idea that social media was a contributor. We just knew we had a big wave of depression. By 2019, enough studies are coming in that I start saying, wait a sec, there's evidence linking the technology here. And so as I began to collect the data on mental health from around the world, two interesting things we found are that in both Scandinavia and in Australia and New Zealand, you had the exact same hockey stick curves of anxiety and depression that we had in America. That is, the levels of it, and I've got on my Substack after Babel, we have a whole report on the Anglosphere with a long section on New Zealand. We got lots of graphs showing what happened to your teenagers was the same as what happened to ours and the Canadians and the British and also the Scandinavians, the Nordic countries. We all, even though you guys let your kids out, even still, if kids go through puberty on social media, on a smartphone and social media, things don't come out right. They don't develop normal toughness. They're anxious. Their whole life is a gigantic performance review. All the time they're being rated. So yeah, you got the same problems as us.
Mm. And you've written widely about how adolescent brains are particularly vulnerable in this kind of always online era. So can you explain a little bit about what's happening to developing minds when they're exposed to these algorithmic, immersive environments from such a young age?
Yeah. So really at the heart of the anxious generation is a lot of analysis of puberty. And everyone needs to understand puberty, you only get one puberty in your whole life. Nobody gets two. And puberty is this really important time for brain development because your brain is, humans have these big brains. They grow a lot in the first couple of years, but they're actually almost full size by the time you're 6. There's not much growth after that. But what happens after that is neurons die away, and the ones that remain get super connected, and they develop the adult configuration of fully competent adult brain. It's about pruning and reconnection. It's not about growth. All right. So when does that happen? Well, it's always happening, but it happens really, really fast during puberty. During puberty, your body is growing, but your brain is rewiring from the back to the front. The frontal cortex is this, that really kind of locks down into the adult pattern, more like mid to late teens, all the way up into your 20s. All right. So if you're a parent and you know that your child's brain is going to go through a super open period where it is looking for input from the environment, and in almost all human societies, we adults gave them input. We said, okay, initiation rites, we're going to teach you the ways of our culture. So most societies have understood puberty is a time when adults, not just the parents, the whole community of adults has a really important obligation to help them make that crossing. And what do? We give our kids a smartphone and social media right around age 10 or 11 across the developed world. And we say, you know what? To hell with you. I'm busy. Why don't we let weirdos on Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat raise you? Let's let them program your brain, and we'll see how that comes out. And we see how that comes out. So puberty is really at the heart of it. We've got to protect puberty.
Yeah, it seems like input is just so important during that time. Prime Minister, your own children are older now. How did you navigate social media through the teenage years?
Yeah, well, actually, Amanda and I have done a lot of reading, as parents right from the beginning, and we continue to do it. And a lot of the brain development stuff, we had read a lot about that. And we had quite a simple model in parenting, which I've spoken about before, which was, 0 to 5 we're caretakers, 5 to 12 we're cops, 12 to 18 we're coaches, and at 18 plus we've got you through the other side and you're an adult, and now we go to 24/7 consultants. So it's so you've actually got to shift gear as a parent as you go through those different phases. And it's exactly because as Jonathan just said, there's brain development going on, there's different things that are needed and need to be imparted at that point in time. And if you care, the biggest fear that we have as parents is that we're not going to impart our values onto our kids. My kids got raised in a different set of circumstances than how I got raised. But the values is actually what you want to be able to transmit to your kids. So we had that as our sort of broad parenting model. And as a consequence, between the ages of 5 to 12, we were a pretty heavy cop mode. And so as a result, our kids didn't have access. They would get choice at that time, to say, look, do you want to do video gaming, TV, or computer time? And it was sort of an hour or two a week on a weekend, and that was it. Yeah. So we sort of banned it all in our house pretty much. And as a result, the kids actually learnt to relate. They learnt to talk to adults. They came through pretty, adjusted. And, we always have our moments in each of those issues and each of the personalities. But and as a result, then when they got into phones and into computers brought into high school in New Zealand, that stuff, they sort of had quite a lot of mature response around it all, to be honest. So I think they were probably, they were born in 2001, 99, 2001, so probably a beat before it really started to take off and go totally bananas. But you want them to have their identity shaped in their values and who they are, and actually having confidence about that, and without all that other stuff coming in and shaping that. I was very grateful that we've been able to put those boundaries in place.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing you talk about the cop mode, because I mean, my kids are still really young, but a lot of people have said to me that when they're young, parenting is very physical, and then it becomes a real mind game.
Yeah.
As they get older, it becomes very psychological.
Yeah, and if you've done your job right, they are emotionally attached to you as they then go into young adulthood. And now it's just left that, look, I can give you my point of view on anything you want. If you want some advice, that's cool. But they will reach out and ask for that advice because you put that emotional connection in place through that period of time. But that for us has been, was the frame by which we sort of approached it.
And right now in New Zealand, we don't have an independent online safety regulator. We don't have a compulsory code of practice, and laws written before TikTok was even kind of around. Laws, so they are somewhat irrelevant. Why do you think New Zealand is such an outlier when it comes to legislation?
Look, I just think the technology overtook us, and I think a little bit of the she'll be right. I don't think we were all on top of it, to be honest, and paying attention, if I'm really honest about it. And I think, our legislation is outdated. It is, 30 years old, and that's why we've got such a big focus now on trying to make sure that we have a different starting point from even Australia or from the UK or some of the Scandinavian countries and our existing laws. But that's why we've got to get legislation in place by the end of next year that will actually, deal with this under 16 ban. What's been really interesting is, stopping use of the mobile phone in schools across the country. That was the first step, was really to say, look, Jonathan, we've got 2,500 schools across New Zealand, and we've basically said it's phones away. And as a result, it's been very, very successful. We took a lot of grief at the beginning. And then what happened is just miraculously yesterday, we had our educational review office do a very formal study. And I thought I'd tell you, but it sort of said 80% of teachers are actually reporting an improved students' ability to focus on their work. 66% report that student achievements actually improved. 75% say removing the cell phones has improved student behaviour. And we've had 66% report bullying in schools is reduced. And
it's fantastic.
That to me was a very important first step. I know we've got to deal with the social media piece, and that's the next focus. But it's interesting because essentially principals, parents and kids, frankly, were out of control and had lost control and actually needed the government, I felt, to come in and actually do that, even though we took a bit of grief and opposition at the beginning. I think now I move around schools and kids come up and say they're actually semi-grateful for it, and balls are going through windows and kids are talking, and and those results, I think, from teachers telling us that stuff is actually really, really helpful. So that's a good first step, but now we've got to push on and get the under 16 social media stuff done.
If I could add just a little bit to that, I'm so happy to hear that you're getting those results. That's exactly what we're hearing in the U.S. In the U.S., 19 states did it right. 19 of our 50 states banned phones from bell to bell, so the kids are off all day. Another 19 or so did it just during class time, which doesn't work, because if you're taking drugs away from a drug addict 8 times a day and you're giving it back to them 8 times a day, you're not going to get very good results. But in the states that went phone free the whole day, it's spectacular. And here's the things we most hear. We hear laughter in the hallways again. It used to be silent. We hear screaming and laughter and playing in the lunchroom, which used to be not silent, but pretty quiet. And the surprising thing I didn't anticipate was that we always hear huge drops in discipline problems and especially violence. Because why would you beat the hell out of someone if you can't take a video and put it online? And so fights plummet. There's much less violence in schools now. And the other fun one is that the libraries report kids are coming into the library and taking out books. We haven't seen kids walk in the door in years.
They're discovering something called a book again.
It seems to work.
That's brilliant. Yeah, well, we had a principal on the podcast earlier on, and he said that the main casualty has been the odd ball through a window. Which he said is actually positive, because it means that they're outside, they're playing ball with each other again. So I thought that was quite good. We can take the old broken window if it means the mental health is going to improve.
It's a good thing.
Absolutely. And I think I heard from a principal yesterday, now they're having to close the windows because there's so much hubbub, which they just haven't experienced for years because everyone was silently on their phone.
Yeah, interesting.
It is really tough, Jonathan, for parenting cops to try and police this stuff. What other roles do you think government can do and help parents on this battle?
Mhm. So phone-free schools was the first one, and that's one which is super easy because all the teachers supported it. The teachers hated the phones, the principals hated the phones. So that was a super easy one. Um, it, the next thing is to just raise the age, for God's sakes.
Mm.
The great majority of parents in the US and Europe favor having a minimum age, as we have for drinking and driving and gambling and all other adult activities. And most of these things, talking to anonymous strangers online, some of whom want sex or money from you, is an inherently adult activity. This is just not something that, well, we just need to teach our kids how to talk to people who want sex and money from them. No, this is not an appropriate activity for children.
Mm.
Um, in the US, we have, I think, a stronger libertarian reaction. There are more people who say, oh, it's the parents' responsibility. It's not government's job to do this. Um, and that's true throughout the Anglosphere. We all have something of a libertarian heritage. But I think that argument may have carried water 10 years ago.
Mm.
But what parents are finding is we can't do it.
Mm.
Unless you can literally keep your child away from the internet, if they can get to a browser anywhere, they can open as many accounts as they want. They just lie and say they're 13 or 18 if they want to get on porn. So parents are discovering that we can't possibly do our job in the online world, and therefore I think we have to have a minimum age. And the wonderful thing about this is that it's not like we're depriving kids of something that they want. It's rather the kids are in it because they have to be in it because all the other kids are in it. But many studies have now shown that if you say, well, how would you feel if everyone was off? And then young people say, oh, well, that would be great. So government can solve a collective action problem that we parents are not capable of solving on our own without somebody to set the norm and say, who's responsible for this? It's not you, parents. It's the goddamn companies that are stealing your kids' attention, introducing them to drug dealers, sending them depression and eating disorder content. It's their responsibility. That's what Australia did. It's going to work. And that's what a lot of other countries are thinking of doing. And I'm so happy to hear that you may be one of the countries that's going to go along with that too.
Yeah, well, it's also, we see it as giving the power back to the parents. We don't see it as the government taking over the power, because at the moment, these huge tech platforms have so much influence and access to our children, more so than parents in a lot of cases. So when we get rid of that influence then goes back to the parent to be able to have more control and more influence over their children. So I think there's just a bit of a reframing that needs to happen. It's not about less control for parents, it's about more.
And it's about each of both parents and government and community leaders all playing their part in our society. And we actually have different roles, complementary roles, and actually cooperating on that challenge, I think, is what's important. So the role in government is, yes, we can take the regulatory action. That's what we should be doing, setting the operating system up right, making sure the riverbanks are in place. And then it's up to parents within that construct and within those confines to actually do the best that they can with their kids as well.
Jonathan, you've been advocating in this space for a number of years. Do you get the sense this year or this time is different? Because a lot of this research has been going on for several years now. Do you get a sense that worldwide there's a bit of a shift happening?
Oh, there's a gigantic shift. I've never seen anything like it. Because what happened when my book came out in 2024, in March of 2024, the only real opposition I faced was that a lot of people said, yeah, you're probably right, but it's too late. You can't put toothpaste back in the tube, and the technology's here to stay. And what are you going to do? The kids will just lie about their age. And so there's a real sense of hopelessness that we just can't change this. But my argument was, well, if your kid's life depended on it, you would find a way to put toothpaste back in a tube. And that's what we're doing. And the amazing thing that happened as soon as the book came out was that wherever it came out, whatever country, mothers read it right away, and it went out over the mother telegraph lines and all the book groups and discussion groups. And because the book talks so much about the need for collective action, it was mothers who immediately took collective action. They went to the schools and said, let's go phone free. They got together and said, let's let our kids play with each other outside. And so it really was a mother's rebellion. And as you probably know, in Australia, the most important piece of legislation passed anywhere in the world is Australia's bill to raise the age to 16. And that was initiated because the Peter Malinauskas, the premier of South Australia, his wife was reading The Anxious Generation in bed, and she says, Peter, you've got to read this book, and then you've got to do something about it. And he did. He launched that first piece of legislation, which then I think someone, the premier of New South Wales, who's in the other side, he did the same thing. And then Albanese picked it up and said, we're going to do this nationally. So it really has been driven by mothers, by female legislators, and by the wives of male legislators. It's really a mother's rebellion.
Yeah, well, I think the timing of your book was so perfect because I think we had all been feeling it, that something is not right, that young people are dealing with this addiction and this doesn't feel right. And so the timing of your book having evidence, and it almost gave us all permission to say, we can do something about this now if we all get together and take some collective action. For parents who are listening, who don't have younger kids, who have teenagers that are in the throes of it, that think it's too late for us, our kids are on social media, they're on their devices all the time, what are some practical steps that can genuinely help a child who is already hooked? Because that's tough, right?
Yeah, that's a great question.
That is much tougher. No, it's true. Parents of young children love the book. They're excited to get started. And parents of older children, like me, they're like, what the hell did we do? But here's the good news. So I'm a professor at New York University. I teach in the business school, and I teach a course called Flourishing. I teach one version for undergraduates who are around 19 years old, plus or minus, another for MBA students who are around, late 20s. And I can tell you, these 19-year-old students, their habits, their minds are still really growing and open, and they can make changes. And what I do is I do a survey of, how much are you sleeping, how much time are you spending on social. I do a whole survey of their habits. And I say, if you're spending more than 2 hours a day on social media, you must make that your project for the course. You have to get it down to less than an hour. You have to get it off your phone. I'm not saying you have to delete your account, but get it off your phone. And there in every class of 30, there's always several that are on for 4 or 5 hours a day.
Oh
And when they cut it down, they suddenly discover, I have plenty of time to do my homework. So I'm not stressed anymore because there's no time pressure. And I can go out with friends now because I have time. Social media will expand like a gas to take over your child's entire life. But when they make changes to their habits, they get changes to their feelings, their behavior, and they start to develop more competencies. So do not feel that if your kid is 18 or 20 or even 24, that it's too late. And here's the other piece of good news is that you rarely have to persuade them because Gen Z, they totally understand what's happening. I have not yet met a single member of Gen Z who says, no, the phones are good for us. We love them. They all see what's happening. So you can help them. You can help them to see that if they change their habits, they'll get huge benefits. And they're afraid of being alone. They're afraid of getting off if no one else is off. So encourage them to do it in a small group. Do it with their friends. That's so much easier and more fun.
Prime Minister, what about your children now? Because you had those foundations early on around screen time and social media. What's their relationship with their phones and social media like now? Are they quite good at self-managing?
Yeah, they are. I mean, they're 23 and almost 24 and 26 now, just turned 26. So no, they have a pretty healthy, they've got their life is filled up with, getting with groups of friends and work and other things. So I think actually putting those boundaries in place for them meant that when they could engage with it a bit later in their late teens, they hit it with a bit more maturity. And as a result, they were confident in themselves. And then they have balanced that pretty well. And I think you're right, Jonathan. I mean, I just observed that, there's that dopamine hit and just the brain rot that happens as people are just scrolling. I talk to kids about it as well as I move around the country, and they just get caught in a loop of just wasting time and seeing time go away in that way. And actually, when you make that case to them, they actually all will freely admit, this is probably not good for me. So I think, I think the young people in this generation, I think actually Jonathan's right. When you pitch it at them and you give them an opportunity to make a change, they do want to. That they are wanting to better themselves, right? They are curious. They are wanting to be the best versions of themselves, and we've got to make that pitch and that appeal to them. but quite hard, I think, for those that have got deeply addicted to the dopamine hit that comes as a result of that scrolling, to actually break that pattern.
Absolutely, Jonathan. And you mentioned it fills up like a gas. I haven't heard that phrase, but that's quite a neat way to think about it. What has that taken from childhood? What were the things that we've kind of put on the side? There's just so many hours a day on social media and on device. What has that replaced?
No, that's right. I mean, a way that I think about it, because my book is not primarily about social media; it's about childhood. And if you think back on your childhood, and you think back on all the most exciting times, the things your fond memories, probably what I find when I do this with groups is, most of them are outside playing with friends, doing something with friends. Okay, so now imagine what it's like to grow up today, and you can imagine it what it's like to be a member of Gen Z by a process of subtraction. So think of all the sunlight that ever entered your eyes when you were a child or a teenager. Cut that by 50% because you're not outside very much. Think of all the times you shared a laugh with your friends. Like shared laughter is this very deep human thing. Like we get in synchrony, it really bonds us. Cut that by 70% because they will laugh at a funny video, but they're not sharing a laugh with friends. Think about all the exercise you ever got. Cut that by 20 or 30% because now childhood's very sedentary. Think of all the books you read. Did you ever read any books when you were young? Cut that by 70%. Once you give your kid a smartphone, they're going to stop reading books. So parents should think, what's the right age for my child to stop reading a book? That's the age when you should give your kid a smartphone and social media. So it's really the process of subtraction. And risk taking. Think of all the things you ever did that were risky and exciting. And it turns out kids need to face risk over and over again to learn how to handle risk. Cut that by 90%. How about if you raise a child with no opportunity to learn how to judge risk for themselves? So by a process of subtraction, we take almost everything valuable out of childhood, and then we pump it chock full of short videos. It's really the short videos that are the worst of the worst. They have no redeeming value. And so, if you have teens, and you think it's hard to control them, I agree it would be hard to take them off of Instagram or Snapchat because they're totally connected to their social life. But TikTok is the worst of the worst, no redeeming value. I would encourage you to either have them remove TikTok entirely or at least limit it to, 10, 20 minutes a day just so they could see a few things but not spend time scrolling.
And I think it's important for adults to look at their own behaviors as well, because a lot of adults can relate to what you're talking about, Jonathan, is that constant scroll and then getting addicted to that constant dopamine cycle, especially if you've got children. I think we need to look at it from a holistic approach. Parents need to sort out their habits too. So it's not just a case of do as I say and not as I do.
Yeah, I think
I would strongly agree with that. For two reasons. One is because of the example we're setting for our kids. The other is that just recently, I have been finding studies. There was a meta-analysis that came out recently showing that watching short videos is at least correlated with problems paying attention, difficulty reading, basically cognitive decline. And while the effects are bigger for young people, it's actually true for all of us. And so there's increasing evidence that when we watch the short videos, you get into a kind of a zone. And what it teaches you to do, all of us, what the short videos do is they teach your brain to say, I've been watching this video for 7, 8 seconds now. It's kind of interesting. Not enough. Go to the next one. Go to the next one. Go to the next one. So if you watch the short videos, it trains your brain to expect everything is super duper interesting. Why should you ever have to listen to anything that's not super duper interesting? And that means it's going to be very hard for you to have a conversation with another human being.
God, well,
I think that's a really good.
No,
but I think that's a really good point you raise. I was at a restaurant the other day, and there was a mum and a dad and a son and a daughter there, and all 4 of them were on their devices in the restaurant. And you thought, actually, this was the time for mum and dad to invest in those young people and attach to them. And that example being set by parents where. And I remember being, actually in America, and there were, watching my son play soccer. He wasn't actually a great soccer player. I worked that out when he was behind the goal, sort of reenacting a Star Wars fight with Darth Maul in his mind. But and said, buddy, we need to get you back on the pitch in front of the goal. That's really you're the goalkeeper. But
sort of your main role.
But you literally watch there, and kids are playing soccer, and they just want their parents to say, "I'm fully present. You're important to me. I'm 100% focused on what you're doing." And instead, you saw the dads on the sidelines on their phones, taking a telephone call. And the kids pick it up. And so I always had a rule when I came home that my kids never saw me on my phone during the weekend. And so I always get up early and I go to bed a bit later. So once they were, before they got up, I could process all my work stuff. But I didn't want them ever to feeling that device was dominating for their attention, And I think habits of parents actually are really quite important.
Yeah, well, I mean, you see it at swimming as well. Like when I go to swimming, there's all these kids in the pool who cannot swim, and parents are all on their phones. But it's not a judgment, right? Like this is just it's an observation of where we're at as a society, and then how bad of a problem this addiction is, and how we need to get through it. But Jonathan, do you see any evidence that these platforms are willing to change their ways on their own, or do you think legislative pressure is the only way?
There is huge evidence that they will not change unless pressured to do so. We've known for a long time that kids are getting severely harmed. The companies promise that they will do something, and then they never really do. And so an area that my group has been focusing on, if you go to my Substack, afterbabel.com, or I guess afterbabel.com, as you would say, we've taken for TikTok and Snapchat, because so many kids are dead and so many parents are suing these companies for what happened on their platforms. And so many states are suing them because of the cost of all the emergency services. So in the process of all these lawsuits, there's a process of discovery where some documents have come out. And so we have quotations from employees, from their emails. We have reports that the companies commissioned. And they know that they are hurting people at an industrial scale. So just to give one example, in the documents we have from Snapchat, in 2022, they were getting 10,000 reports of sextortion from their users, not per year, per month, every month. And because that's just what was reported, that means it was many, as they say, this is just the tip of the iceberg of the number getting sextorted, blackmailed after sending a naked photo, is probably many times 10,000 per month. And so the trail of misery is so gigantic. Snapchat could fix it tomorrow if they just kept the messages, kept them on their server so that the cops, the investigators could find them. And if they dropped the quick ad feature, which is how strangers get to children, is through a friend of a friend of a friend. So the companies could fix this tomorrow if they wanted, but that would reduce their user base, and so they don't do it. Meta did introduce teen accounts on Snapchat, and at the time I praised them because it was a real step. Like it looked like, oh, they're actually going to clamp down on some of the ways that strangers get to kids. But one of a former Facebook employee who, a whistleblower, Arturo Bejar, he tested out, I can't remember the exact number, but something like out of 100 features here, only like 7 or 10 actually worked. So again, they talk a good game. Whenever legislation is before the U.S. Congress, that's when they did this. Whenever the U.S. Congress is thinking of regulating them, then they talk about safety, but then they don't do it. So it's going to take lawsuits. It's going to take parents actually, for the first time ever, getting money from these companies for killing their kids. And it's going to take legislatures like Australia and New Zealand to actually force them to change their ways. And part of the reason I'm so excited about what you're doing in New Zealand is, okay, Australia went first on the age. And if nobody follows, then Meta can ignore it and just, okay, it's Australia. But if New Zealand follows, and I talked with President Macron when I was in Paris, the EU is thinking of doing it as well. So, if it's now clear that the world is saying enough is enough, 16 is the minimum, you can't be on it below 16, then I think they're going to have to change it globally, including in the United States, where the chance for legislation is zero because the tech brothers control the US Congress and they're good friends with the president. So America, we caused the problem. We're incapable of fixing it. We need you to help us. Please help us.
Well, Prime Minister, we might go to you on that because we have talked about this kind of fast follow advantage. Maybe we have not encumbered with lots of historical laws. There's lots of activity happening in the government. And for us who aren't that political, you might want to outline that for us because we've got a lot of parents watching and listening who might be thinking, I heard the government's doing this. I heard they're doing this. Is this part of this? What's happening?
Yeah, so we want to have in place by the end of next year legislation about the social media ban, right? So that's in motion. there's two routes to it. One is we've got in our parliamentary system, we have a members' bill. So Catherine Wedd's introduced a members' bill, and that actually has been drawn from what's called the biscuit tin, and that means that it actually gets processed by
Which
Parliament.
is incredible. It was 1.3% chance.
Yeah. But it's great. So any individual member of Parliament or congressman, as you know it, Jonathan, can actually put a bill idea forward, and then it's drawn by basically out of literally a biscuit, old biscuit tin. It's called an Allsbrick biscuit tin from the 80s. Yeah.
Jonathan, stop laughing. We're a small part of the world.
Jonathan, if you get back off the floor, it'd be helpful for the podcast. But so that's one route. So we've got that route to build out from.
Okay.
And then separately, I've also asked Erica Stanford to go off and actually commission some government thinking about making it a government bill as well, and what would be required there. As you know, there are 6 political parties in the New Zealand Parliament. I don't think this is a political issue. I think this is a New Zealand issue. And as a result, I'm up for any party wanting to work with us and support what we're doing. And I think there'll be very good support across the whole of the Parliament. There will be some that will have a libertarian stance. There'll be others that will have an aversion or an opposition for some other reason. But I think it's so we've got those 2 pathways in place. But either way, so Erica's close to, hopefully by the end of the year, having some thinking that she'll bring to Cabinet, which is our decision-making body. And we'll either progress that government bill and keep both fires, keep both avenues open to us.
And we know you're not best friends with everyone in government and parliament.
Publicly, anyway.
Actually,
you might be best friends in private.
Can you let the parents know, do you think that we could work together?
Absolutely, we must. And I think, honestly, I've spoken to politicians across, even when I was in opposition, and I wasn't even in, the Prime Minister and in government, about this topic, and I think there's real interest across all the political parties. There's people in all those political parties that are very supportive of this. So I think it's about, we actually had raised this as a team actually before Albanese sort of started to raise it within Australia. So we were quite, there's a bunch of us that are quite interested in this topic. The benefit is that we are seeing what the Australians, as they've worked through their legislation, takes effect in December. And as a result, we'll be able to get some good insights about what's worked well, what hasn't worked well, what would you tweak even further. And we'll be able to build that into our legislation. And the great thing about New Zealand is when we want to move, we can move really fast with legislation and we can get it done and get it sorted and get the benefits starting to happen quickly. So, my commitment is we'll have something in place by the end of the term, which will be next year. And then I think it'll be also a need for us to have an ongoing program of work of further strengthening, because as we've seen, the technology continues to change and evolve, and we'll need to see what level of compliance is achieved and not achieved through that legislation. Is it working as intended? To get the incentives right, to get the actions that we want to see happen. So so it's there's 2 avenues. Either way, I think it's going to happen, and I think there'll be broad political support. And as I said, it's if we don't politicise it and we just keep it about New Zealand and about our kids, as Jonathan said in his original book, we have lots of security in the physical world, but we don't have any parameters in the virtual world, and so we need to make sure that we're putting that in place.
Well, that's very encouraging.
That's really exciting. And so, how then do you? Because we're talking about future-proofing the law, how do you ensure that it is robust enough? Who do you consult during this process? Will you consult educators, parents?
Yeah, there'll be what's our process is that we put forward a bill, which is, and then we send it out to the public for 6 months, and so experts and there'll be folk like yourselves as parents and other educators and psychologists and others that might want to contribute to that debate discussion. They'll have up to a 6-month window to do that. And then we take it back to Parliament for a second reading, and then we have a discussion in Parliament, and then we might improve the technicalities even further. Yeah. And then by the time you get to a third reading, the bill has been through public consultation. Parliamentarians have thought about how it works in practice, and then when it gets passed into law, it's often, I think our process means we end up with quite effective, legislation by and large.
Very encouraging. And so, Jonathan, just looking forward to the future as well, when I Googled your books, of which there are many and very impactful, I saw there's one coming up called The Amazing Generation. And I thought that's quite a neat title.
Yeah.
If you're happy to, can you explain about what that book's going to be about?
Oh, sure. So, when The Anxious Generation came out, a lot of parents read it and wanted to bring their kids along. And they said, is there a version for kids? And I said, no, that's a great idea. And we found an amazing woman who I was already working with, Catherine Price. And together, she and I turned it into a book for children. I just got this 3 days ago. This is the first printed version. It comes
I
out
love it.
December 30th
It's hot
in
off
the
the
US.
press.
It comes out January 8th in the UK. So I imagine it's going to be in Australia, New Zealand very soon after that, if not then. And it's for kids 8 to 12. And there's a graphic novel, so even an 8-year-old can enjoy the graphic novel, but everybody likes the graphic novel. And then there's like the main text that kind of explains what's happening, and it's all about how to live that kind of childhood we were talking about. So there's what we call the Rebels Code. There's just two principles: use technology as a tool. Don't let technology use you. That's one, and the other is fill your life with real friendship, freedom, and fun. That's it. If you do that, you're going to have an amazing childhood, an amazing life. I mean, okay, yes, there's more. But if you do those two things, you're well on your way. And if you don't do those two things, you're going to miss your childhood. You're going to spend your puberty scrolling, and you're not going to be a fully formed adult.
That's great. We've had Dr. Samantha Marsh on the podcast before, and she has talked about how to speak to young people about this. And instead of the "don't do this because it's bad for you," which is exactly what the tobacco companies learned when we were in that kind of crunchy time of bringing in legislation for that. What they learned was if they say don't do this, it's not for you, it's bad for you, that actually made the kids want to do it even more. And so then we figured out that when we tell kids actually what these companies are trying to get from you or how they're trying to use you, then that was actually even more it worked even better.
Much more impactful, right?
Yeah. So something like that, Jonathan, is brilliant, but because it just lays it out. Instead of saying this is bad for you, don't do it, it's saying, well, here's the information. What do you think?
Yes.
Absolutely. That's right. No, that is here. I'm just looking for the page. So yeah, we have a big part of the book is this 5 secrets of the tech wizards and what they're doing to you. They're not selling apps, they're selling you, and they know it's hurting kids. They don't let their kids on it. So that is the way to get to kids. It's not to say, eat your broccoli or you'll end up with, intestinal problems. Like that doesn't work. These guys are out to rip you off and you can have a fun, exciting life.
Mm-hmm.
Do you reckon you'd do a version for 12 to 18-year-olds?
Good question.
How would you reach them?
I'd say by 14 or 15, they can read the main book.
Yeah.
14 or 15, I wrote The Anxious Generation to be very accessible. I'm an academic, but in my books, I try to make them totally accessible. So by 14, 15, they can read the main book, The Anxious Generation. Also, we're making a documentary with a major production company that will come out at the end of 2026.
Great.
So that will reach all ages. If you go to anxiousgeneration.com or just go to YouTube, I have a lot of videos that would be appropriate, that lays it out, but it would be appropriate for kids that age.
Great.
It's great, Jonathan, to have those practical advices. One of the things I'm slightly losing sleep about is when that go live time happens in Australia. Some parents and kids in whānau, they may have just kind of lost the skills of what we call doing basic things, getting in amongst your kids. It might be a bit of a foreign concept. And how can they get in front of it when they've suddenly got a young person who says, I don't really want to talk to you. I don't know how to talk to you.
Yeah.
And what are we meant to do on Sunday afternoon if we're not gaming the whole day?
Yeah.
So first of all, almost every reform, certainly phone-free schools, almost every reform is easier than adults think because adults assume that the kids love this stuff and we're taking from them something that they love and they're going to resist. And that is never true. So the reforms are usually much easier. Kids are not afraid of losing Snapchat and Instagram. They're afraid of being left out and having everyone else on Snapchat and Instagram when they're not. So that's what they're afraid of. But if you say, how about we take this away and no one else is on it? Then a lot of them celebrate. And even though some won't celebrate right away, but a few weeks later, what they find is like, oh, actually, this is a lot more fun. My daughter at New York City public schools New York State, they all went phone free in September. And my daughter, who's 16, now she never had social media, so she was always the odd one out. But she says lunch is so much more fun now because we're playing games, we're talking.
Absolutely.
So yeah, maybe on the first day it's going to be awkward, but they're still kids at heart, and within a few days they kind of remember how to play games, how to talk. So we worry about it too much. I can promise you, it's going to be easier in Australia on December 10th. Actually, I just read it's beginning on December 4th. They're beginning to close. Meta is going to begin to close down some accounts. My prediction is that it's going to be easier than people expect, and we're not going to have like kids like trembling on the floor because they're in withdrawal and they have to have their Instagram back.
Prime Minister, I'm going to start this question with you. But if New Zealand proceeds with raising the digital age to 16, which it sounds like we will, which is very exciting, what long-term impact do you believe that could have in 5, 10, 20 years for our young people?
Oh, look, I think exactly as Jonathan's been talking, they're going to be much healthier. I mean, much rounded individuals. More balanced in terms of social interaction, physical interaction. Working on things of purpose that matter, emotional. You think about the different energies in life and how you want to make sure that you're balanced in all of those 4 types. I think you're going to end up with healthier, happier kids as a result of it. It's also a huge opportunity, I think, for parents to think about how they, as you were just saying, Manish, how you use that time to sort of build the family dynamic, to build your relationship with your kids, and to get enjoyment out of it. So I'm really genuinely very excited about it, because I just think you see the effects of what's happening now. We actually have to die trying, frankly, is what I've said to my political colleagues, doing something. We can take the criticism, it's not going to work and blah, blah, blah. But actually we need to do something, and doing something, even if it's imperfect, even if it doesn't, we have to do it for the sake of our kids. So there is no option, there is no choice. But I think there's huge benefits for New Zealand and for our kids and for their future. I mean, to have our job as parents is to produce happy, healthy, independent adults, and they come to us as dependent babies. We work through the process of parenting, and our goal is to have happy, healthy, independent kids at the end of it. And this is certainly going to help us.
I'd like to add on to what the Prime Minister just said, if I may. I love the way he put it. We have to do this. We have no choice. And I want to emphasize, AI is already here for our kids. AI, like 6 months ago, we kind of knew it was coming. Now, I don't know if you've been following, but we have a lot of court cases now where the AIs, they encourage the kill to kill himself. And, yes, cold steel to your head, that's courage, that's commitment, and then the kid blows his brains out. And they talk about sex with kids all the time. So it's already here. And just in the last few months, it's washing up on the shore, and it's coming for our kids' relationships. So AI is going to be 10 times more destructive than social media. And so we have to win on social media and age gating now. It's a revolutionary concept that kids can't go everywhere on the internet whenever they want. It's a revolutionary concept that there could be age limits. We have to get it done in the next year, because without an age limit, there's going to be no way. The AI companies are pushing it into schools. They're pushing it everywhere. They're pushing it to toys. Parents, do not buy your children a toy that has a chatbot in it. Nobody should do this. Okay, so we've got to establish.
I think they heard you, mate. I think they heard you.
Message received there.
So, Jonathan,
anyway, yes, we have no choice.
So, Jonathan, do you know how other countries are starting to tackle the whole thing of AI? Because that feels like a whole other fish to fry that is a real problem.
Yeah. So there's a lot of related issues there. Let's take, so there's a couple. One is the issue of chatbots and the harms that they cause when you have relationships. So our general policy at Anxious Generation is any AI that might possibly say "I love you" should not be interacting with a child. And since that's almost all of them, so they shouldn't be having interactions. The bigger question, another question is the education question. And what we're hearing is, oh, well, AI tutoring is going to be amazing. And in theory, it could. And Khan Academy is already good. But what we're getting now in education is the same thing we've gotten all along from tech, which is, here's what could happen in an ideal situation. Our technology could help. Yes, it could. And then we look at how it's implemented, and it's a complete goddamn disaster. Test scores have been dropping across the United States and in many countries around the world, not since 2020, it wasn't COVID, it was since 2015. As soon as we put computers on kids' desks, they're watching TikTok, they're watching porn, they get around the filters. So it's insane to put technology on a child's desk. I teach graduate students, I teach MBA students, and I realized 5 years ago the class has to be completely device free. Nobody can use a laptop in my class because nobody, including me, none of us can avoid multitasking if there's a screen in front of us. So given that the computers and tablets on desks has been a disaster for education, and we probably should get them all out of all schools, you can have a computer room, kids can learn to use a computer, but you can't be having these devices on kids' desks. Now, once the devices are there, they are going to be stuffed full of AI within 6 months. I mean, certainly by your next academic year, everything's going to be AI for your kids. And do we know that it's bad? I think we're coming around, but certainly the track record is such that, yeah, it's going to be really, really bad for them. So we should be using what's called the precautionary principle. How about companies, if you don't do your safety testing on our kids at mass scale? How about if you do it first? If you can show it's safe, then you can roll it out. But stop with the mass testing of experimental drugs on children that backfire, that are harming them, and then in the US, we can't even sue you. You're protected from lawsuits.
Mm-hmm. I've always struggled with that because, say I'm interested in cheese and I want to sell it at a Sunday market. There's some controls to making sure it's safe, that I'm not making people sick. But online, you can seem to do it with kind of impunity. You just gotta, so we've missed a step there, maybe. And so,
well, maybe that's the next step, Prime Minister.
Yeah, well, the hard part is actually exactly as Jonathan said. It's the promise of what's sold, and then it's the downside risk of it in execution having completely either intended or unintended consequences. And I think that's what I meant before by we just need to stay super vigilant as this thing develops. I mean, for New Zealand, Jonathan, AI has massive opportunities in terms of how we run government and how people can access services and
super
all that good
stuff.
stuff. There's some really upside positive stuff to it as well, but managing the downside risks are really, really, really serious. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, when automobiles came out, I'm sure people said, this can help us do all sorts of things. And I'm sure somebody said, how about we don't let 7-year-olds drive?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so there's a way through it. It's just that we have to invent the solution. We can't just, we have to, because it's so dynamic and it's so changing, that's the trick, is how do we keep up with it all and how do we regulate for it? Yeah.
Absolutely. And finally, for both of you, after everything we have covered, what gives you hope? Jonathan, let's start with you.
What gives me hope is that parents are rising up, teachers are rising up, legislators are rising up, and in the US also, it's totally bipartisan. There is only one issue in the entire country where you can get Republicans and Democrats to work together, and this is it. So when my book came out, I didn't expect that the world would change so quickly. But the fact that everybody was fed up, right and left, male and female, teachers, print, everybody was fed up with this. So what gives me hope is that we actually can put toothpaste back in the tube. We actually can roll back the phone-based childhood. And again, it's not just about the technology, it's about childhood. We can reclaim childhood and return a healthy human childhood to our children.
Yeah, I feel hopeful because I've seen the reaction to what we did on the mobile phone ban. And then you think, yes, the next logical thing is the under 16 ban. But the other reason I feel quite hopeful is this is quite an incredible generation when you get to meet them. And, I've got kids that have come through that generation and I meet them up and down the country every day. But, they genuinely, they want to collaborate. They don't have some of the prejudices of the past. They are altruistic. They're smart. They're very thoughtful. They've got good IQ, good EQ. And I think the world can be in really good hands going forward with this generation. And our job as the ones going before them is to make sure that we're setting them up for success so they can continue to build out from our work as well. So, it's challenging, it's tough. There's lots of things to overcome. But I think if we just keep the focus on the arc of where we're trying to drive, it's a pretty exciting place.
Kids are amazing. I think we can all get behind that, which is
the amazing generation.
The amazing generation. Good segue. And thanks to you, Jonathan. I'm not even sure if we'd be talking about this subject if it wasn't for people like yourself.
Yeah.
So a personal thank you from me.
Yeah, no, likewise, mate. I as I said, I started reading your articles a long time ago and just think you've been a really good provocateur and challenger. It's been really awesome.
Yeah, and Prime Minister Christopher Luxon, Ngā mihi, thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate both of your time. All of your work on this issue, Jonathan and Prime Minister, is much appreciated. So thank you.
Good to be with you.
Thank you. Hats off to you for taking action and for being able to speak about it so powerfully. I really enjoyed our conversation.
All right, take care. See you.
Thank you,
Jonathan. Thanks for listening to One Young Mind. We're on a mission to understand what our tamariki are experiencing online, to listen, connect, and make sense of this challenging topic, bringing the conversation to the forefront. If you enjoyed the show, subscribe so you never miss an episode and share it with someone who cares about the well-being of young people.
We'd also like to thank everyone who makes this podcast possible. We simply couldn't do it without you. Executive producers Flicker Williams and Julie Clothier, editor Luke Johnson, Omzi for our branding and design, and the recording team at PodLab, and our commercial partners 2 Degrees and iHeartRadio and the team at Before 16. Thanks for listening. Ka kite anō.